My name is Samuel. Well, that's what you can call me. I'm 43 years old, originally from Yaoundé, Cameroon, and I've been a wildlife guide in the Congo Basin for almost 20 years. I've led expeditions for universities, film crews, wealthy tourists wanting to see gorillas. I know that forest like I know my own hands. I'm not a superstitious man. My father was a teacher, my mother a nurse. I was raised to believe in what you can see, touch, measure. When village elders would talk about the Boloko or forest spirits, I'd smile politely and think they were just stories to scare children away from dangerous animals. I'd seen leopards, forest elephants, even a few pythons big enough to swallow a man. Those things were real and deadly enough. I didn't need myths. That changed in March of 2019. I was leading a small group, just 3 clients, all Belgian researchers studying canopy ecosystems. We were deep in the Zangasunga Reserve, maybe 40 kilometers from the nearest village. The rainy season was just beginning, and the forest had that heavy, pregnant feeling it gets before the afternoon storms roll in. Everything smelled like wet earth and rotting vegetation, that thick green smell that gets into your clothes and stays there. It was our 4th day out. We'd set up camp in a small clearing near a stream, nothing unusual. The researchers were excited. They'd gotten good data, spotted a family of colobus monkeys. Normal stuff. We built a fire, ate our rice and tinned fish, talked about the next day's route. By 9 o'clock, everyone was in their tents. I always take the last watch. Years of habit. I sat by the dying fire, listening to the forest do what it does at night. The insects screaming their chorus, the distant cough of a leopard, the rustle of things moving through the understory. If you know the forest, these sounds are like a language. They tell you what's normal. Around 11, the insects stopped. Not gradually. All at once, like someone had flipped a switch. In 20 years, I'd never heard silence like that. Complete. Total. Even the stream seemed quieter. The hair on my arms stood up, and I felt my throat go tight. In the forest, silence means something big is moving. Something that makes everything else shut up and hide. I grabbed my flashlight and my machete. I don't carry guns, never have. And I stood up slowly, scanning the tree line. The fire had burned down to coals, giving off just enough light to make the shadows dance and shift. That's when I heard my name. Samuel. Clear as day. A man's voice, coming from the forest to my left, maybe 30 meters out. It sounded like Kofi, one of the Belgian researchers. Same accent, same slight stutter on the S. Kofi. I called back, confused. What are you doing out there? Get back to camp. Samuel, come here. I found something. The voice was calm, normal, but everything in my body was screaming that this was wrong. I glanced at the tents. They were all closed. No light from inside. No sound of movement. Kofi, is that you? My voice came out shakier than I wanted. Yes. Come quickly. You need to see this. I stood there, frozen. The voice was perfect. Too perfect. The same rhythm, the same words Kofi would use. But Kofi had been exhausted. He'd gone to bed complaining about his feet. He wouldn't be wandering the forest at night. I made a decision that probably saved my life. I walked quietly to Kofi's tent and unzipped it just enough to shine my light inside. Kofi was there, asleep in his sleeping bag, mouth open, snoring softly. My blood went cold. Samuel, please, come here. The voice again, more insistent now, still perfectly mimicking Kofi's tone, but with an edge underneath it, like something pretending to be patient. I zipped the tent shut and backed toward the fire. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the flashlight. Who are you? I shouted into the darkness. What do you want? The response made my stomach drop. Samuel, come here. I found something. Word for word. Exactly the same. Like a recording being played back. Then I heard it again, from a different direction. Behind me this time, near the stream. Samuel, come here. Then to my right. Come here. Then closer. Much closer. Samuel. It was circling the camp. And with each repetition, the voice lost a little bit of its humanity. The accent was still there, the words still clear, but underneath it was something else. Something that sounded like it was speaking through a mouthful of wet gravel. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed a burning branch from the fire and held it up like a weapon, turning in slow circles, trying to see what was out there. The firelight didn't reach far, maybe 5, 6 meters, and beyond that was just solid black. But I saw movement. Not one thing. Multiple shapes, low to the ground, shifting between the trees just beyond the light. They moved wrong. Too fluid, too fast, like they were sliding rather than walking. I found something, Samuel. Come see. This time it was my mother's voice. My mother has been dead for 6 years. I felt my knees almost buckle. The voice was hers, her exact cadence, the way she'd call me when I was a boy, that gentle scolding tone she'd use when I was late for dinner. It was impossible, completely impossible. Sammy, why won't you come? That childhood nickname. No one called me that anymore. I must have made a sound, a whimper, a gasp, something, because suddenly the shapes stopped moving. The forest went even quieter, if that was possible. I could hear my own heartbeat hammering in my ears, feel sweat running down my back despite the cool night air. Then I heard something else. Breathing. Heavy, wet breathing, coming from multiple directions. Not human breathing. This was deeper, more labored, like something with lungs too big for its chest. And then, God help me, I smelled it. It wasn't like any animal I'd ever encountered. It was sweet and rotten at the same time, like fruit that had been left to decay in the sun, mixed with something metallic. Blood, maybe, or something that had been eating blood. The smell was so thick I could taste it on my tongue. One of the shapes came closer, just to the edge of the firelight. I saw it for maybe 3 seconds before my mind tried to reject what I was seeing. It was low, maybe a meter tall, crouched on all fours, but the proportions were all wrong. The limbs were too long, too thin, like spider legs covered in mottled gray-green skin that looked wet. The torso was barrel-shaped, ribs visible through the skin. But the head was the worst part. It was vaguely human-shaped, but elongated, with a mouth that split the face almost ear to ear. When it opened that mouth, I saw rows of teeth, too many teeth, thin and needle-like. And the eyes were huge, bulging, reflecting the firelight like an animal's, but with something else behind them. Intelligence, malice. But the worst part? It was smiling, or trying to. The mouth was stretched in this horrible approximation of a human smile. Come here, Sammy. My mother's voice came out of that thing's throat. I screamed. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I screamed and stumbled backward, and that's when all of them rushed forward at once. I don't know how many there were. 5, maybe 6. They came from every direction, moving in that awful sliding lope, making sounds that were half screech, half laugh. I swung the burning branch wildly, and by some miracle, they scattered back. Fire. They didn't like fire. I grabbed more branches from the fire, throwing them in a circle around the camp, yelling the whole time. Wake up! Wake up! Get out of your tents! The researchers finally emerged, disoriented and terrified, and I shoved burning branches into their hands without explanation. We stood back to back in a tight circle, holding our flames out like weapons, and we waited. The things circled us for hours. I could hear them moving, see their shapes flickering between the trees. They called to us in voices we knew, family members, friends, people from our lives. One of the researchers started crying when he heard his daughter calling for him. I had to grab his arm to stop him from walking toward the sound. We burned everything we could reach. Spare clothes, notebooks, tent fabric, anything to keep the fires bright. And slowly, as the sky began to lighten in the east, the voices stopped. The shapes melted back into the forest. The insects started their chorus again. By the time the sun was fully up, it was as if nothing had happened, except for the smell. That sweet, rotten smell lingered in the camp for hours. And when we packed up to leave, and we left everything we couldn't carry, we practically ran out of there. I saw the marks. all around where we'd been standing. In a perfect circle, maybe 20 meters wide, the undergrowth was trampled down. And in the soft mud near the stream, I found prints. They looked almost like human handprints, but with 6 fingers instead of 5, each one ending in a curved claw. The prints were everywhere, dozens of them, pressed deep into the mud. Some were on top of each other, like the things had been pacing, circling, waiting. I took the researchers straight back to the nearest village. They flew home the next day, and I never heard from them again. I tried to file a report with the reserve authorities, but when I described what happened, they got very quiet. The senior ranger, a man I'd known for years, pulled me aside. "You saw the Boloko," he said quietly. "The forest spirits. The mimics." I started to protest, to say that couldn't be real, but he stopped me. "Every guide who works here long enough sees them eventually. We don't talk about it because tourists wouldn't come. But they're real, Samuel. They've always been real. The old hunters say they used to be human, once, but they ate the wrong thing in the forest, flesh from a sacred grove, or maybe each other during a famine. They can't die, and they can't leave the deep forest. All they can do is hunt and hunger and call out in voices that aren't theirs." I didn't go back into the deep forest for 8 months. When I finally did, I only take day trips now, and never more than 10 kilometers from the road. I carry a lighter in each pocket and a can of kerosene in my pack. And I never, ever answer when I hear my name called in the forest. Because I know now that sometimes the voice calling you isn't trying to help you find your way. Sometimes it's trying to help you get lost.